A world without the internet feels impossible today. But what if I told you an ancient empire built its own version 2,000 years ago? This is the story of the Roman information machine, a vast network that connected a continent. By the end of this video, you will see the ancient world through a startling new lens, discovering how an emperor's command could race across mountains and seas with an efficiency that rivals our own. We will uncover the hidden hubs that served as ancient data centers and decode the human couriers who acted as living routers. How did a message travel from the misty hills of Britannia to the sun-baked streets of Rome in just weeks? And what happened when this entire system suddenly went dark? The answers reveal a civilization far more connected than we ever imagined. What do you believe is the most important invention for holding an empire together? The internet at its heart is not really about fiber optic cables or glowing screens. It is a set of powerful ideas. First, it is about speed, moving information faster than any physical object could travel. Second, it is a network, a web of interconnected points that allows a message to find multiple paths to its destination. Third, it relies on shared rules, a common language or protocol that every part of the system understands. And finally, it is about scale, shrinking continents down to the distance of a single click. If we strip away the modern technology and look only at these core functions, we have a clear checklist. Did any ancient system achieve rapid information transfer across a vast, interconnected network using standardized methods? This is not about finding computers in marble temples. It is about searching for the skeleton of a network, the ancient logic of connection. And when we apply this checklist to the Roman world, something remarkable begins to take shape. Rome built its information highway not from silicon, but from stone and gravel. The famous Roman roads were the physical backbone of their entire world, the hardwired cables along which data flowed. This was no simple collection of dirt paths. It was a masterclass in civil engineering, a sprawling web of over 250,000 miles of purpose-built highways that stretched from the rainy highlands of Scotland to the arid deserts of Syria. To walk one was to experience a system designed for permanence and speed. These roads were layered constructions, often starting with a deep trench filled with rubble for drainage, then packed with sand, gravel, and finally topped with fitted stone slabs that cambered slightly to shed rainwater. They were built to last centuries and to function in all weather, allowing travel long after local trails turned to impassable mud. But the true genius was in the standardization. Every Roman mile, about 1,000 paces, was marked by a stone pillar. These milestones did more than just measure distance. They were the empire's way of imposing a single, understandable grid upon a chaotic landscape. A traveler, or more importantly, a government courier, would always know exactly how far he was from the next major town or military outpost, and spaced along these measured miles were the way stations, the mansions and mutations. Think of these not as quaint inns, but as vital network nodes. A mutatio was a relay station where a messenger could swap his tired horse for a fresh one in minutes. A mansio was a larger rest house with food, lodging, and security, allowing for longer stops. This infrastructure transformed a long, grueling journey into a series of efficient, manageable legs. A message was no longer tied to the endurance of one man or one beast. It could leapfrog across the empire, carried by a chain of fresh riders on a road that was always clear, always marked, and always leading to Rome. The road itself became a kind of permanent, physical command line, waiting for an instruction to be sent down its length. This network of roads, however, was just the empty circuit. To bring it to life, Rome needed a power source, a dedicated system to push information through those stone veins. That system was the cursus publicus, the imperial postal service, and it was the beating heart of the ancient internet. Established by Emperor Augustus around the time of his reign's beginning, This was not a public mail service for sending birthday greetings. It was a government-controlled information superhighway, a logistical masterpiece designed for one purpose: to bind the empire together with the swift flow of command and intelligence. At its core was a simple, brilliant relay principle. Official messengers, known as cursors, traveled along the roads from one designated station to the next. These stations were precisely spaced. A mutatio or change station appeared roughly every 8 to 10 miles, the distance a horse could gallop at full speed before tiring. Here, a courier would simply swap his exhausted mount for a fresh one without even dismounting, losing only minutes. After about 3 or 4 of these horse changes, he would reach a mansio, a larger rest house for an overnight stop, where he could pass his dispatches to a fresh rider if needed. This relay method meant the message never stopped moving, day or night. The speed achieved was staggering for the ancient world. A priority dispatch, carried by a series of riders in light carriages, could cover over 170 miles in a single day. To put that in perspective, a report of a rebellion in Gaul could travel from modern-day France to Rome in under a week. These couriers carried the lifeblood of the empire, sealed leather pouches containing everything from military orders and tax records to census data and reports on provincial governors. The cursus publicus was the protocol that animated the physical network, turning silent roads into a buzzing channel of state intelligence. But what exactly was racing down these imperial lines? The messages themselves were not simple scrolls of gossip. They were carefully structured information packets, each designed for a specific purpose and secured against interference. At the highest level were the literae, the official dispatches. These were the empire's command line instructions, often bearing the emperor's own seal. A single pouch could contain an edict raising taxes in Egypt, a promotion for a legate on the Rhine frontier, and a decree establishing a new public festival in Rome, all intended for different officials in different provinces. Military orders formed another critical data stream. A general in Britannia might receive precise troop movements, supply requisitions, and intelligence on Pictish tribes, all coordinated from the imperial center. Then there was the mundane yet vital data of governance, the census rolls and tax records. These were the empire's spreadsheets, vast compilations of names, property values, and grain yields that allowed Rome to administrate millions of people. Each of these documents followed standardized formats. A tax record from Hispania would look nearly identical to one from Asia Minor, using the same columns and terminology. This consistency was the empire's software, ensuring that any official anywhere could instantly read and process the information. Security was paramount. Important packets were sealed with wax imprinted by a signet ring, a physical form of authentication that acted like ancient encryption. Any broken seal would show the message had been tampered with. Couriers also carried manifests, clay tablets or wooden diptychs listing the contents and destination of their pouch. This allowed station masters to log the packet's journey, creating a primitive but effective tracking system. So a dispatch from the emperor was not just thrown on a horse, it was packaged, addressed, secured, and logged, moving from node to node across the network until it reached its specific destination. In function, it was remarkably similar to a digital data packet traveling through a series of routers today, carrying its payload of information wrapped in headers that told the system where it needed to go and how to handle it. These data packets did not fly randomly across the map. They flowed along a deliberate and hierarchical architecture, converging on massive urban hubs that functioned as the empire's servers and data centers. At the very top of this pyramid sat Rome itself, the ultimate central processing unit. Every major road, every sea lane ultimately led here. In the bustling tabularium, the state archives, clerks processed a ceaseless stream of information, cross-referencing military reports with tax yields and provincial petitions, synthesizing raw data into a coherent picture of the empire's health. But Rome could not manage a continent alone. It relied on a network of powerful secondary hubs. A city like Alexandria in Egypt was more than a famous library. It was a critical economic and logistical node. Grain shipments from the Nile, reports from the Red Sea trade routes, and administrative scrolls from all over Egypt would flood into its offices, be consolidated, and then sent onward to Rome in summarized, actionable bundles. Similarly, Antioch in Syria served as the command hub for the entire volatile eastern frontier, filtering intelligence from dozens of legions and client kingdoms before passing it up the chain. Even at the edges of the empire, a provincial capital like Londinium in Britannia operated as a vital regional server. Local magistrates from smaller towns would send their census counts, court rulings, and mineral assay reports to Londinium. There, provincial governors and their staff would compile this local data, add their own analysis and recommendations, and transmit the essential findings back to the central authority. The flow was a constant, rhythmic pulse. Local data flowed inward to the regional capital, condensed information then flowed upward to Rome, and Rome's synthesized commands, laws, and allocations flowed back out through the exact same channels. This hierarchical design prevented the central system from being overwhelmed by every single piece of local data, much like how modern networks use local servers to handle regional traffic before communicating with a central mainframe. The empire's stability depended on this smooth, two-way conversation between its brilliant core and its intelligent peripheral nodes. The true power of this system was measured in velocity. For the ancient world, the speed of Roman communication was nothing short of revolutionary. A priority dispatch carried by the dedicated riders of the cursus publicus could achieve what once seemed impossible. Take a crucial message from the governor's palace in Londinium in the far north of Britannia. Using the relay of horses and carriages along the paved roads, crossing the channel by boat, and continuing down through Gaul and over the Alps, that message could reach the emperor's desk in Rome in about 4 to 5 weeks under optimal conditions. That is a journey of over 1,000 miles through some of Europe's most difficult terrain, completed in little more than a month. From the other end of the empire, urgent news from Alexandria in Egypt, traveling by ship across the Mediterranean and then up the Italian coast, could make the trip in roughly 3 weeks. These were not the speeds of casual travel, these were the breakneck paces of state intelligence. To understand why this was so extraordinary, we must step outside of Rome and look at the normal pace of the ancient world. In most other contemporary societies, information moved at the speed of a walking person or a sailing ship dependent on the winds. A king in Persia might wait many months for a report from a distant satrap. A Greek city-state could be conquered by an invading army before the news even reached its allies a few hundred miles away. Messages were carried by lone travelers on unpredictable roads, with no guarantee of fresh horses, safe passage, or even the traveler's survival. The Roman system eliminated that uncertainty. By creating a dedicated, state-funded infrastructure of roads, way stations, and professional couriers, they engineered consistency. They turned information transfer from a hopeful gamble into a reliable, scheduled service. For its time, this was the equivalent of high-speed data transmission. The empire did not just send messages, it launched them along a precision track, shrinking its vast geography into a manageable network where decisions made in the capital could alter events on a distant frontier within a single season. This velocity of command was a form of power as potent as any legion, allowing Rome to react, adapt, and administer on a scale no civilization had ever achieved before. Yet speed and infrastructure alone were not enough. A network is only as strong as its shared language, the common rules that allow every part to understand the others. For Rome, this was not just about technology, it was about culture and bureaucracy. They engineered a suite of universal protocols that turned a patchwork of conquered nations into a single, functioning system. The most obvious protocol was Latin itself, Across the empire, from the misty outposts of Germania to the bustling markets of North Africa, Latin served as the administrative operating language. A tax decree issued in Rome did not need translation for a clerk in Gaul. A military order from the emperor was instantly legible to a centurion on the Danube. This linguistic uniformity was the empire's basic code, ensuring that data, in the form of written commands, was universally interpretable, but the protocols ran much deeper. Roman law acted as the empire's master software. Whether you were a citizen in Italy or a subject in Syria, the same fundamental legal principles applied to commerce, property, and civil order. This created a predictable environment where contracts written in one province were enforceable in another because they were built on the same legal framework. Think of it as every region running compatible software, so files from one could be opened and used anywhere else. Then came the economic protocols, standardized coinage, weights, and measures. A denarius minted in Rome had the same silver content and value as one minted in Alexandria. A modius of grain was the same volume in Hispania as it was in Asia Minor. This removed the constant friction of conversion and fraud, allowing trade and taxation to flow smoothly. A merchant in Carthage could price his goods for a buyer in Corinth without a complex negotiation about exchange rates or the size of a bushel. For the government, it meant census data on wheat production from Egypt could be directly compared to data from Sicily because both were measured in the same units. This cultural and bureaucratic standardization was the invisible glue. It allowed a Celtic chieftain turned local magistrate in Britannia to interface seamlessly with the central authority. He could read the laws sent to him, collect taxes in official coinage, and submit reports using the expected formats. His region, with all its local customs and gods, could plug into the Roman network because the protocols for communication and transaction were universal. The roads carried the physical packets, but these shared rules carried the meaning, ensuring that an empire spanning 3 continents could act, at least in matters of state, as a single, coherent mind. Every packet of information, every sealed dispatch relied on a living, breathing human element to find its way. This was the empire's flesh and blood circuitry, a vast hierarchy of people trained to move, sort, and protect the data. At the pinnacle were the imperial couriers of the cursus publicus, the elite operators of the network. These were not mere delivery boys, they were trusted government agents, often soldiers or freedmen with proven loyalty. They underwent rigorous training to memorize routes, recognize official seals, and maintain a punishing pace. Their authority was absolute on the road. They carried a special diploma, a lead or bronze tablet granting them the right to demand fresh horses and provisions from any station. A courier's sole mission was to keep the packet moving, to be a flawless, reliable carrier for the data entrusted to him, passing it hand to hand down the chain like a living, breathing fiber optic cable. But the system had many layers. In each province, the governor's palace was a buzzing local server room, staffed by scribes, archivists, and clerks. These officials were the network administrators of their region. They received raw data from local towns, deciphered it, compiled it into standardized reports, and decided which information was critical enough to forward up to Rome. A clerk in Antioch, for instance, might receive a dozen scrolls about minor bandit activity, local harvest yields, and a dispute over water rights. His job was to synthesize this, perhaps sending only a single, concise summary to the capital while handling the rest locally. He was a filter, preventing the central system from being flooded with redundant or trivial data. For the most sensitive information, especially on the restless frontiers, Rome deployed a specialized class of human routers, the military speculators. These men were far more than scouts. They were intelligence agents and high-speed messengers rolled into one. Attached directly to legionary command, they were chosen for their discretion, endurance, and knowledge of both the terrain and local languages. A speculator might carry a general's secret battle plans, or more vitally, He might be gathering real-time intelligence behind enemy lines and racing back to report it. He operated outside the neat, predictable stations of the cursus publicus, moving through hostile territory where the official network did not reach. His mission was to connect the Roman military machine to the chaotic, unpredictable data of the battlefield, ensuring that strategic commands were based on the freshest possible information. And then there was the unofficial, organic layer of the network, the merchant and traveler grapevine. While the state system carried official commands, gossip, trade news, and rumor flowed along the same roads on a parallel track. A Syrian spice merchant sailing to Ostia carried more than pepper and silk. He carried word of a drought in Egypt or whispers of political unrest in an eastern court. Sailors in a port tavern, mule drivers at a mancio, pilgrims heading to a temple, all became incidental carriers of information. This public chatter was noisy, unreliable, and often wildly inaccurate, but it provided a constant, low-fidelity background hum about the empire's mood and events. Sometimes this unofficial news could even outpace the official dispatches, arriving in Rome as unverified rumor days before the governor's formal report confirmed it. So the Roman information landscape was a two-tiered system, the official, secure, high-speed network of the state, overlaid with a bustling, chaotic web of human conversation. Both were essential, one for command, the other for context, and both were powered by people who understood that in a vast empire, knowledge was not just power, it was the very thread that held the tapestry together. Running parallel to the emperor's gleaming network was a shadow system, one driven by profit and personal connection rather than imperial command. This was the world of the tabularii, the private letter carriers. While the cursus publicus was the government's secure intranet, the tabularii powered the bustling, open marketplace of public information. Wealthy senatorial families, sprawling business enterprises, and powerful merchant guilds all maintained their own fleets of these messengers, who were almost always trusted slaves or freedmen. Their cargo was the lifeblood of commerce and society, private letters between family members, detailed contracts between business partners in different provinces, and crucially, the latest commercial intelligence. A tabularius employed by a wine exporter in Campania might be racing north to a trader in Lugdunum, modern-day Lyon, carrying not just a personal greeting, but the vital news that this year's vintage was poor, advising his master's partner to buy up existing stock before prices soared. This was insider trading at the speed of a fast horse, and it happened entirely outside the state's view. These private networks created a vibrant, decentralized layer of communication. A merchant in the Forum of Carthage did not wait for an official government report to learn that grain shipments from Egypt were delayed. He heard it from the tabularius of his trading counterpart in Alexandria, who arrived on a fast coastal ship days, sometimes weeks, before any imperial dispatch would have been filed and sent. Gossip, family news, and philosophical musings traveled along these same channels. The famous letters of Cicero, full of political maneuvering and personal reflection, were delivered across the Mediterranean by his own teams of tabularii, allowing him to manage his reputation and alliances from a distance. This system was inherently more fragile than the state's. It relied on the resources of private individuals and was vulnerable to bandits, shipwrecks, or simple dishonesty. But it was also incredibly adaptive and widespread, weaving a dense, informal web over the empire. While the official network moved in straight, hierarchical lines from node to hub to Rome, the private networks crisscrossed in all directions, connecting port to port, vineyard to market, and friend to friend. Together, these two systems created a remarkably complete information ecosystem. The state intranet handled the heavy, secure data of governance and defense. The public, merchant-driven network handled the dynamic, real-time data of the economy and society. One was centralized and authoritative, the other was distributed and agile. Often, they literally shared the same infrastructure, with private tabularii paying to use the state-maintained roads and staying at the same mansions as imperial couriers, though without the right to demand fresh horses. In a tavern at a way station, you might see an imperial courier, stone-faced and focused, guarding his sealed leather pouch at one table, while at the next, a chatty merchant slave shared news and rumors with travelers from 3 different provinces. The official packet held the emperor's new tax rate. The conversation around the table held the first whispers of whether that tax could actually be collected. This dual-layered reality meant the Roman world was awash in information flowing at multiple speeds and for multiple purposes, a constant hum of updates that kept the commercial engine running and families connected across vast distances, proving that even in antiquity, the demand for a social network was just as powerful as the need for a state one. But the Roman information machine was not just for secret dispatches and private letters. It also had a public broadcast channel, a way to project the official narrative directly into the heart of the city. This was the acta diurna, the daily acts. Imagine walking through the crowded, sun-drenched forum in the heart of Rome. Amidst the noise of merchants and politicians, you would find a designated wall or a set of whitewashed wooden tablets, constantly updated by a team of scribes. These were not casual notices, they were the empire's official daily newsfeed, meticulously compiled from the most important data streams of the state. Every day, scribes would transcribe summaries of senatorial decrees, the outcomes of major court trials, announcements of public appointments, and even the births and deaths within the imperial family. This was the raw output of the government's own network, repackaged for public consumption. But the acta diurna went beyond dry bureaucracy. It also included what we would call human interest stories, reports of remarkable events from across the empire, like a strange animal birth in the provinces, a major fire in a distant city, or the arrival of a spectacular foreign ambassador. It was a blend of hard official data and compelling gossip designed to inform, shape opinion, and reinforce the image of a functioning, all-seeing state. In its function, the acta diurna was a brilliant one to many broadcast medium. A single source, the imperial administration, published information that could be read by thousands of citizens in a single day. Wealthy Romans would often send their own slaves to the forum to copy down the day's bulletins and bring them home, effectively subscribing to the feed. These copies would then be recopied and sent out to friends and contacts in other towns, spreading the official word far beyond the city walls. This system operated like a primitive but highly effective version of a government news website or an RSS feed. It took the centralized data of the empire, the same information flowing through the cursus publicus, and turned it into a public spectacle. It created a shared information space for the urban populace, a common set of facts and stories that everyone could discuss, debate, or simply marvel at. For a citizen in Rome, reading the acta diurna was like checking a live update on the health of the empire, a daily reminder that they were connected to a vast news-generating machine. It proved that the Romans understood a fundamental truth about information networks, that to truly control the narrative, you had to master not just the secure, point-to-point transmission of commands, but also the public, broadcast dissemination of the story itself. The military was the empire's most demanding client, requiring a communication network of its own, one that operated with the precision and urgency of a modern command and control system. Beyond the roads and couriers, the legions built a layered, real-time web of signals designed for instant response. Across the frontiers, especially along rivers like the Rhine and Danube, they constructed chains of small, fortified watchtowers known as burgi. These towers were more than just lookout posts, they were relay nodes in a line-of-sight network. If a sentry in one tower spotted a raiding party crossing the river, he would not send a runner. Instead, he would light a pre-arranged signal fire or raise a specific flag. The next tower in the chain would see it and immediately repeat the signal, passing the alert down the line at the speed of light, or at least at the speed of a visible flame. Within minutes, a fort miles away could be mobilizing its cavalry long before any hostile force could reach its walls. This was the Empire's early warning system, a primitive but incredibly fast way to transmit a single, crucial piece of binary data: danger is here. On the battlefield itself, where chaos reigned, the Romans eliminated ambiguity with sound. They used a standardized set of trumpet calls, each with a distinct and universally understood meaning. The deep blast of the tuba might signal a general advance, while the sharper notes of the cornu commanded a specific cohort to wheel left or right. The classicum, a special call, was reserved for the most critical moments, like a direct order from the commanding general or the signal to attack. In the din of clashing swords and screaming men, these clear, piercing sounds cut through the noise, allowing centurions to coordinate complex maneuvers across a sprawling front. A legion did not fight as 10,000 individuals. It fought as a single organism, and these audio signals were its nervous system, carrying commands from the brain, the general, directly to its limbs, the individual units. But the most intimate view into this military network comes not from grand signals, but from tiny handwritten notes. At a remote fort called Vindolanda, on the rainy northern frontier of Britannia, archaeologists unearthed a treasure trove of thin, postcard-sized wooden tablets. Preserved in the wet, anaerobic mud, these Vindolanda tablets are the equivalent of a regiment's saved emails and text messages frozen in time. They reveal a dense, localized network of communication humming with activity. One tablet is a formal military report, a request for more supplies, specifically noting the need for more beer for the garrison. Another is a personal invitation from the wife of one commanding officer to another, asking her friend to come for a birthday celebration. There are lists of goods, duty rosters, and even a soldier's letter home complaining about the terrible British weather and requesting warmer socks. This is the granular, real-time data of frontier life. It shows a system where the formal, logistical needs of the army, like beer supplies, existed side by side with the social chatter that maintained morale and personal bonds. The fort was not an isolated outpost, it was a vibrant node. Messages flew between Vindolanda and the larger base at York, between centurions, between families, and between traders. It was a microcosm of the larger empire, proving that even at the very edge of the known world, the Roman drive to connect, to report, and to communicate was alive and thriving in stunning, everyday detail. But for all its sophistication, the Roman system was bound by the hard limits of its time. It was an analog network in a physical world, and those constraints created profound gaps when compared to our digital reality. The most obvious missing element was instantaneous transmission. No matter how fast the courier, no matter how efficient the relay, information moved at the speed of a galloping horse or a sailing ship. An urgent plea for reinforcements from a besieged fort on the Danube would still take days, even weeks, to reach Rome. There was no real-time video call with the emperor, no live satellite feed of the battlefield. This time lag meant crises could escalate beyond control before the central command even knew they had begun, a vulnerability that would haunt the empire in its later years. The system also lacked anything resembling digital storage. Data was not encoded in bits that could be perfectly copied and backed up in multiple locations. It lived on fragile, physical media, papyrus scrolls, wax tablets, and animal skin parchments. The great libraries of Alexandria or the archives of Rome were magnificent, but they were singular points of failure. A single fire, a flood, or the decay of time could erase centuries of accumulated knowledge in an afternoon. Information was not immortal, it was perpetually at risk. Furthermore, the official network was overwhelmingly a one-way, top-down broadcast for state business. The emperor and the Senate spoke, and the provinces listened. While merchants and travelers created a lively chatter, There was no mechanism for the average citizen of Gaul or Egypt to publish their thoughts to a mass audience. No equivalent of a social media post or a public blog that could challenge the official narrative on a continental scale. Replication was a manual, painstaking process. Every copy of a law, every duplicate tax record, required a scribe to laboriously handwrite it, introducing the possibility of human error with every stroke of the pen. There were no printers, no photocopiers, no command to duplicate a file perfectly 1,000 times over. And perhaps most significantly, there was no algorithmic processing. The Roman clerks in the tabularium were brilliant human computers, cross-referencing scrolls and spotting trends through observation and experience. But they could not run a database query to instantly find every citizen in the empire over the age of 30 who owned more than 50 acres of land. They could not model the economic impact of a drought in Africa on grain prices in Rome with complex simulations. Analysis was slow, intuitive, and limited by human memory and manpower. So while the Romans built a breathtakingly advanced network for moving information across space, they could not transcend the fundamental barriers of time, perfect duplication, or automated analysis. Their internet was built from sweat, stone, and papyrus, a magnificent and powerful system, yet one forever anchored in the physical realities of the ancient world. The true test of any network comes not in times of peace, but under the crushing pressure of a system-wide crash. For the Roman information machine, that stress test arrived with brutal clarity in the year 69, the infamous year of the 4 emperors. The suicide of Nero left a power vacuum that shattered the empire's political stability, and in that chaos, the communication network revealed its dual nature, a tool for control that could also become a weapon of chaos. The news of Nero's death did not travel as a single, clean packet. It exploded across the provinces like a corrupted file, mutating with each retelling. In Hispania, the elderly Governor Galba heard the reports and, believing himself the Senate's choice, declared himself emperor. His proclamation raced down the roads toward Rome, carried by his own couriers. But in Germania, the powerful Rhine legions had a different candidate, their commander Vitellius. They too dispatched messengers, spreading the word of their allegiance and demanding support. Suddenly, the empire's clean, hierarchical data flow was replaced by competing, contradictory broadcasts. Armies began to move not on a single emperor's order, but in response to the information, and often the misinformation, that reached them first. A legion in Pannonia might receive a dispatch from Galba's faction claiming legitimacy, only to get a conflicting message from Vitellius's supporters a week later. The standardized protocols still worked, the roads were clear and the mansions functioned, but they were now carrying viruses, conflicting commands that paralyzed provincial governors. Who did they obey? The network's great strength, its speed, became a critical vulnerability. False reports could outpace corrections. A rumor that a rival emperor had been assassinated could trigger a premature celebration or a disastrous military maneuver. The armies themselves became massive physical expressions of information processing. Vitellius's forces began a slow, grinding march from the Rhine to Italy, a movement that was itself a statement, a piece of geopolitical data visible to the entire peninsula. Meanwhile, in Rome, the short-lived Emperor Otho, who had overthrown Galba, received constant updates on Vitellius's progress. Each fresh estimate of the enemy's location and strength required a new calculation, a new set of orders dispatched to his own troops. The network was buzzing, but it was now a feedback loop of panic and reaction. Then came the ultimate game changer, a new signal from a distant node. Vespasian, the general prosecuting the war in Judea, watched the chaos from the east. He received the news of Otho's defeat and Vitellius's rise not through official channels, which were in disarray, but through the merchant and military gossip network. He realized the central processor, Rome, was compromised, so he made a calculated decision. He declared himself emperor and began gathering support from the eastern legions. His messages to Egypt and Syria were not just commands, they were offers of alliance in a new, decentralized power structure. The final act of the crisis demonstrated the network's enduring physical logic. Vespasian's supporters, led by his lieutenant Antonius Primus, marched from the Danube to Italy. They moved faster than Vitellius's sluggish forces because they traveled lighter and used the relay system more aggressively. When they won the decisive battle outside Rome, the news of Vitellius's fall did not just trickle out, it was broadcast with purpose. Vespasian's couriers raced along every major road, carrying the same packet to every governor and legion, a simple, unifying message: the war is over, the new emperor is in control. In that year of chaos, the network did not fail. It performed exactly as designed, moving information with terrifying efficiency. The failure was political, a lack of a single, legitimate source to authorize the data. The crisis proved that the Roman internet was a neutral tool. It could uphold an empire with perfect order, or it could tear one apart with equal speed, depending entirely on who held the seal and controlled the narrative. The chaos of civil war exposed the network's raw power, but its true purpose was revealed in the quiet, relentless rhythm of peace. To understand the Roman information machine at its most sophisticated, we must follow a single, vital commodity from field to mouth. The grain supply to Rome, known as the annona, was not just a matter of food, it was the ultimate logistical puzzle, solved daily by a continent-spanning system of communication. Every loaf of bread distributed to the city's million inhabitants depended on a flawless flow of data that coordinated farmers, shippers, warehouse managers, and bakers across the entire Mediterranean. The process began not in Rome, but in the sun-baked fields of Egypt and North Africa, the empire's bread baskets. Months before a single ship was loaded, local officials were compiling meticulous harvest reports. They estimated the yield of each district, measured in standardized units, and sent these figures up the chain to the provincial capital. In Alexandria, administrators for the annona would receive a flood of these local reports. Their job was to act as human processors, collating the data, calculating the total available surplus, and determining how much grain the state needed to purchase or tax to meet Rome's annual demand. This was a massive, early form of predictive analytics, using past consumption data and current harvest numbers to forecast need. Once the target was set, the orders went out. A dispatch would race from Alexandria to a port official in a town like Cyrene, authorizing the purchase of 50,000 modii of wheat from specific estates and commanding its transport to the docks by a certain date. This triggered another cascade of local communication, notifying landowners, hiring carters, and securing warehouse space. All of this information moved on papyrus along the same roads and sea lanes used by military orders, but its content was purely economic, the lifeblood of the city. The most critical phase was the shipping itself. The grain fleet did not sail at random. It operated on a published schedule, a maritime timetable dictated by the seasons and secured by the Navy. Ship captains received sailing orders detailing their route, their convoy assignment, and their destination port in Italy, usually Ostia or later, the artificial harbor at Portus. But the sea was unpredictable. A storm could scatter a fleet, delaying vital cargo. The moment a ship arrived or was overdue, that information became a priority packet. Harbor masters at Portus would send daily reports up the Tiber to the officials of the annona in Rome, listing the ships that had entered, their cargo manifests, and any losses. If a fleet was late, messages would be sent down the coast to other ports, asking for sightings, activating a search protocol. This constant tracking allowed administrators to manage public anxiety, adjusting the daily grain dole if a delay was expected, or tapping into emergency reserves stored in the massive courier, the state granaries that rose like fortresses along the river. These warehouses were themselves data hubs. Each silo and room had its own records, clay tablets or ledgers noting the origin, quality, and entry date of every shipment. and more importantly, the amounts dispersed each day to the authorized bakers and distribution centers. A clerk could, in theory, trace a specific batch of Egyptian grain from the dock to the bakery that turned it into bread. The final distribution to Rome's citizens required yet another layer of precise data management. The grain dole was not a free-for-all. It was a tightly controlled entitlement for eligible male citizens, each registered on official lists. These lists had to be constantly updated, removing the deceased and adding those who came of age, a task that required coordination between neighborhood officials and the central Annona office. On distribution day, these verified lists were used to allocate the precise amount of grain or bread to each district, a logistical feat ensuring order and preventing riots. From the African harvest report to the Roman baker's tally sheet, the entire operation was a monumental exercise in information relay. It required the synchronized movement of data about weather, agriculture, maritime logistics, inventory, and demography, all flowing through the empire's network of roads, ships, and couriers. The Annona was the ancient world's most advanced supply chain management system, and it could not have functioned for a single season without the Roman internet humming in the background, turning the chaos of a continent's harvest into the orderly daily bread of a metropolis. Yet for all its bustling traffic of scrolls and orders, the Roman world also understood the need for a permanent home for knowledge, a place where information did not just move but settled and grew. This brings us to the legendary Library of Alexandria, a monument that functioned as the ancient world's ultimate hard drive. While separate from the dynamic cursus publicus network, the library represented the other critical pillar of an information society, the deep, static storage of collected wisdom. Imagine a building not of whispering scholars, but of relentless, systematic acquisition. The library's mission was audacious: to obtain a copy of every known book in the world. Ships docking in Alexandria's harbor were not just searched for contraband, they were searched for scrolls. Any texts found were confiscated by library officials, copied by a small army of scribes, and then the copies were returned to the owners while the originals were filed away in the vast collection. This was data harvesting on an imperial scale, a systematic effort to centralize the world's intellectual output in one physical location. For a scholar granted access, the library was a universe of information organized with meticulous care. Scrolls were catalogued by author, subject, and a rough classification system, stored in labeled pigeonholes or shelves in halls dedicated to specific disciplines, from astronomy and mathematics to poetry and history. A researcher could request a specific text, and a clerk would retrieve it from the archives, a process not so different from calling up a record from a database today. The library was more than a storage facility, it was a processing center. It attracted the greatest minds of the Mediterranean who lived and worked there, comparing texts, writing commentaries, and synthesizing new knowledge from the old. In this sense, it was like a massive offline server that also functioned as a research and development lab. Its very existence spoke to a profound Roman, and specifically Hellenistic, belief that to master the world, you must first compile and understand all that is known about it. This drive to collect, preserve, and categorize was the intellectual counterpart to the empire's drive to build roads and send dispatches. One system moved information across space with breathtaking speed. The other aimed to stop information in its tracks, pinning it down for eternity against the ravages of time and memory. The library was the ultimate expression of a civilization that saw knowledge as the highest form of capital, a resource so vital it deserved its own fortress, its own priesthood of librarians and copyists. It showed that the infrastructure of an information age is not complete with just the wires and the packets. It requires the vaults and the archives, the places where the data comes to rest and becomes something greater than a message. It becomes heritage. But securing the physical packet was only half the battle. In a world where messages could be intercepted or altered, how did Rome protect the information itself? They may not have had complex encryption algorithms, but they developed a suite of clever, practical methods to ensure data integrity and confidentiality. The most famous of these is the Caesar cipher, named for Julius Caesar himself. This was a simple letter substitution code, where each letter in the original message was shifted a fixed number of places down the alphabet. For example, with a shift of 3, the letter A would become D, B would become E, and so on. To anyone intercepting the scroll, it would look like gibberish. But the intended recipient, who knew the secret shift number, could easily decode it. This method was primitive by modern standards, easily broken with enough text, but it served its purpose for tactical military orders or sensitive political communications where only a brief period of secrecy was needed. It proved the Romans understood a fundamental concept, that the meaning of a message could be deliberately hidden within its form. Beyond codes, they employed robust physical security. The most common tool was the seal or sigillum. Important documents were written on a papyrus scroll, then rolled and tied with a cord. Warm wax would be dripped onto the knot, and the sender would press their unique signet ring into the soft wax, leaving an indelible impression. This seal served multiple purposes. It authenticated the sender like a digital signature. It also guaranteed the message had not been read in transit. If the cord was cut or the wax was broken, the tampering was immediately obvious. A trusted courier arriving with a broken seal might as well be carrying an empty pouch. The message inside was now considered compromised and unreliable. The couriers themselves were a vital layer of security. Choosing a messenger was a decision about trust. Imperial cursors were vetted for loyalty, often drawn from the military or the emperor's own household of freedmen. Their lives and fortunes depended on their discretion and reliability. For the most sensitive missions, a general might send a speculator, an intelligence officer trained in evasion and deception. There are even anecdotal tales from historians like Herodotus, predating Rome but illustrating a timeless espionage trick, of messages tattooed on a slave's shaved scalp. After the hair grew back, the slave would be sent on his journey, the living parchment hidden in plain sight. Upon arrival, his head would be shaved again to reveal the text. While we lack concrete proof the Romans used this exact method, such stories highlight the ancient mindset toward information security. The goal was not always unbreakable codes, but often simple, effective deterrence. A wax seal did not prevent a determined spy from steaming it open and resealing it with a fake ring, but it raised the difficulty and risk of doing so without detection. A Caesar cipher would not stump a dedicated codebreaker for long, but it would stop a casual interceptor or a curious station master. Together, these methods, from trusted men to simple ciphers to physical seals, created a layered defense. They show a clear Roman awareness that their magnificent information network was only as strong as its weakest link. The data flowing across the empire was valuable, and where there is value, there will always be those who try to steal it or corrupt it. In their own practical way, the Romans were engaging in an ancient form of cybersecurity, protecting the integrity of their commands and the confidentiality of their secrets, one sealed scroll and one shifted letter at a time. The constant hum of information did more than just run the empire, it fundamentally reshaped what it meant to be Roman. This network of words and whispers was a powerful social engine, molding daily life, economics, and identity across a vast and varied landscape. At its most direct, the speed of official communication was the ultimate tool of centralized control. A new law passed by the Senate could be dispatched from Rome and proclaimed in the forums of provincial capitals from Spain to Syria within a matter of weeks. This created a remarkable uniformity. A merchant traveling from Carthage to Corinth would find largely the same legal framework governing contracts, the same standardized currency for his transactions, and the same basic administrative procedures. The rapid relay of edicts meant the emperor's will was not a distant rumor, but a local reality. enforced by governors who were themselves kept in check by the knowledge that reports on their performance could reach Rome almost as fast as they could write them. This system enabled the two pillars of imperial power, law and taxation, to function with unprecedented efficiency. Census data flowed in, tax assessments were calculated centrally, and the orders to collect specific amounts flowed back out, all along the same swift channels. The state could adjust its demands based on nearly real-time harvest reports, preventing local famine or exploiting local surplus. The network did not just carry information, it carried the very authority of Rome itself, making the central government a tangible, responsive presence even in its most far-flung territories. Yet the social impact flowed far beyond official decrees. The same roads and sea lanes that carried tax collectors also carried news, gossip, and cultural trends, creating a vibrant, unpredictable marketplace of ideas. In the taverns and porticos of Rome, politics was fueled by more than senatorial speeches. It was swayed by the latest rumors from the frontier, whispered reports about a general's loyalty or the mood of a distant legion, often arriving via merchant ships long before any official dispatch. The grain dole, the city's lifeline, made the entire population sensitive to maritime news. A report of storms delaying the African fleet could send ripples of anxiety through the crowded neighborhoods, affecting public morale and even the stability of the emperor himself. Markets reacted with similar speed. A letter from a trading partner in Alexandria, carried by a private tabularius, might bring word of a poor papyrus harvest or a new tariff in the east. This information, acted upon by savvy merchants in the forum, could change commodity prices in Rome within days. The city was a sponge, soaking up information from every corner of the empire and metabolizing it into political maneuvering, economic speculation, and social chatter. Perhaps the most profound effect, however, was on identity. For a Celtic noble in Gaul or a Berber chieftain in North Africa, being Roman was not solely about ancestry. It was increasingly about participation in a shared information sphere. By reading the same laws, using the same coinage, and hearing the same major news from the capital, whether through the posted edict of a governor or the tales of a traveling soldier, provincials were drawn into a common conversation. A citizen in Londinium might never see the Colosseum, but he would know of the emperor's latest victory from the official bulletins, and he might drink wine from Italy served in a cup styled after the latest fashion in Rome. The constant flow of people and news along those magnificent roads made the empire feel smaller, more interconnected. A shared set of facts, a common legal language, and a pervasive awareness of events in the wider world helped forge a sense of belonging to something larger than one's tribe or town. This was not a uniform culture. Local gods, languages, and customs thrived, but it was a shared civic layer, a Roman overlay enabled by the relentless movement of information. The network, in the end, did not just administer an empire, it helped imagine one into being, convincing millions of diverse people that they were, in some meaningful way, part of the same story. Even the strongest network can fray when the power feeding it begins to flicker. The slow collapse of the Western Roman Empire was not just a story of barbarian invasions and fallen emperors. It was the systematic failure of the information machine that had held everything together. Starting in the turbulent 3rd century, a perfect storm of crises began to sever the empire's vital connections. The first blow was political fragmentation. As rival generals fought for the purple throne, the empire split and splintered. A governor in Gaul might pledge loyalty to an emperor in Rome, only to receive a conflicting order from a usurper in Britannia a month later. The clean, hierarchical flow of data was replaced by competing, contradictory signals. Provincial officials, unsure who to obey, began to look inward, prioritizing local survival over imperial command. This political chaos drained the treasury, leading to the second critical failure, economic decline. The cursus publicus was astronomically expensive to maintain. It required thousands of horses, hundreds of station masters, and constant repairs to roads and buildings. As tax revenues collapsed amid instability and shrinking trade, the state could no longer afford the bill. Salaries for couriers went unpaid. Station masters abandoned their posts to find other work. The meticulously spaced mansions and mutations, once bustling hubs of activity, fell into disrepair, their roofs caving in and their stables standing empty. Without fresh horses and secure lodging, the relay system ground to a halt. A message from Ravenna, the new western capital, might travel 100 miles and then simply stop, with no one to carry it further and no safe place for the carrier to rest. The third and most visceral blow was sheer physical insecurity. As imperial authority weakened, bandits and raiding parties found the magnificent Roman roads, now poorly patrolled, to be perfect avenues for their own attacks. Travel became perilous. A merchant caravan or an imperial courier was no longer a symbol of state power, but a moving target laden with valuables. Regions began to disconnect out of necessity. A town in northern Italy, hearing nothing from Rome for months and facing threats from marauders, would stop sending its tax revenues and census data. It would use its local militia to defend its own roads, effectively creating a small, isolated network that served only its immediate surroundings. One by one, the nodes went dark. In Britain, the official withdrawal of Roman administration in the early 5th century was simply the final acknowledgement of a connection that had already been dead for years. The last imperial dispatch had long since molded in an abandoned way station. By the time a barbarian king like Odoacer deposed the last Western emperor in 476, the deed was almost a formality. The true empire, the interconnected system of law, logistics, and communication, had already crumbled. The roads were still there, of course, but they were now just ancient stone paths leading through a patchwork of isolated kingdoms. The cursus publicus was a forgotten memory. For the first time in centuries, a person living in what was once Gaul had no idea what was happening in Rome, and Rome had no idea what was happening in Gaul. The continental conversation was over. The lights of the Roman internet, which had hummed for over 400 years, went out, plunging the West into a long silence where information once again moved at the speed of a walking man, and the horizon of knowledge shrank to the distance one could see from a village wall. The silence that followed Rome's fall was not just political, it was informational. With the great network dismantled, Europe entered what we might call a dark age of data. The continent-wide conversation that had pulsed along Roman roads for centuries fractured into 1,000 local whispers. Where an imperial courier once covered 170 miles in a day, a message now moved at the pace of a pilgrim on foot or a merchant wary of bandits. The reliable, state-funded relay of the cursus publicus was replaced by haphazard, dangerous travel. A lord in northern France might send a rider to a neighboring castle, but that rider had to provide his own horse, carry his own supplies, and hope the path was safe. There were no guaranteed way stations with fresh mounts, no official passports demanding cooperation from local authorities. A simple letter could take weeks to travel a distance the Romans would have measured in days if it arrived at all. This collapse of infrastructure meant large-scale coordination became almost impossible. Kings struggled to know what was happening in their own distant provinces, let alone in neighboring kingdoms. Without a constant flow of census data and harvest reports, centralized taxation and resource allocation broke down. Power did not vanish, but it hyper-localized, concentrating in the hands of whoever controlled the nearest fortified castle and the few miles of road around it. The horizon of reliable knowledge shrank dramatically from the span of an empire to the borders of a single manor. Into this void stepped a new, fragile kind of network, one woven not by emperors but by faith. The great monastic orders, particularly the Benedictines, became the early medieval world's closest equivalent to information hubs. Isolated monasteries from Ireland to Italy were not completely isolated from each other. They were connected by a shared rule, a shared Latin language, and a shared mission to copy and preserve texts. Monks became the new couriers and routers. A traveling abbot or a scholar moving between monastic houses would carry letters, news, and most importantly, books. The scriptorium of a monastery functioned as a tiny, dedicated data center where scribes spent their lives manually replicating the knowledge of the past Bible's classical texts, works of history, one painstaking letter at a time. This system preserved the flame of literacy and ancient learning, but it was slow, decentralized, and limited in scope. The information that flowed was primarily religious and scholarly, not the real-time administrative data that had run an empire. A monastery might know of events in Rome if a bishop passed through with news, but it would have no reliable information on grain yields 3 valleys over or the movement of Viking ships along the coast. The network was spiritual and intellectual, not logistical. The contrast could not be more stark. Where Rome had built a public, systematic highway for information, early medieval Europe relied on private, ad hoc footpaths. The Roman system was designed for speed and command, the medieval one for preservation and local stability. A Roman governor could order a census and expect compiled results within a season. A medieval king often had to rely on the word of his local counts, who might be more interested in hiding their true wealth than reporting it. This regression in information technology had profound consequences. It made large, complex states incredibly difficult to govern. The Carolingian Empire of Charlemagne, for all its brilliance, was held together by the personal travels of the emperor and his missi dominici, royal envoys who rode circuit to enforce his will. It was a return to human-scale administration, a far cry from the impersonal, bureaucratic machine that could operate from a desk in Rome. The loss of the Roman network meant the loss of a certain kind of vision, the ability to see a continent as a single, manageable system. For centuries after Rome's fall, no one in Europe could truly see that picture again. The world had become a collection of isolated villages, connected only by the narrow, uncertain threads of local roads and the occasional journey of a monk with a satchel of precious books. This silence reminds us that connectivity is not a given. It is an achievement, one that the Romans mastered and then, for a long and fragmented age, the world forgot. The echoes of that ancient silence still shape our world today. We often think of our digital age as a radical break from the past, a sudden leap into the unknown. But if we listen closely, the hum of our modern internet carries a distinctly Roman cadence. The physical backbone of their world was the road, a layered, durable conduit built for speed and reliability. Ours is the fiber optic cable, a strand of glass carrying pulses of light instead of couriers on horseback. Both are feats of civil engineering designed to overcome distance to make the far feel near. The Roman road imposed order on a chaotic landscape with measured miles and stone markers. Our global network relies on standardized protocols and internet addresses to map the digital wilderness. The medium changed from stone to silicon, but the underlying impulse remained identical: to build a better pipe for information. Moving through those pipes, the Roman cursus publicus and our modern data packets follow eerily similar logic. The imperial relay system was a masterclass in efficient routing. A message pouch would travel from station to station, where a local operator, the station master, would read its destination, log its passage, and send it onward via the fastest available path, often handing it off to a fresh rider. This is the ancient ancestor of the Transmission Control Protocol Internet Protocol, or TCP/IP, the fundamental routing protocol of our internet. When you send an email today, it doesn't travel as one continuous stream. It's broken into small packets, each labeled with a destination and sequence information. These packets shoot through the network, hopping from router to router. Each router is like a Roman nuncio, reading the packet's address, deciding the best next hop, and sending it on its way. Different packets from the same email might take entirely different paths across the world. just as a Roman courier might choose a coastal route or an inland mountain pass based on weather and bandit activity. The packets are then reassembled at their destination. The Roman system even had a primitive form of error checking. If a seal was broken, the message was considered corrupted and unreliable. Our digital protocols perform this check mathematically, verifying data integrity at every step. The goal in both eras is the same: to get information from point A to point B reliably, efficiently, and through a resilient, interconnected web where no single point of failure can stop the flow. Consider the public square of information. In Rome, it was the acta diurna, the daily bulletin posted in the forum, a curated feed of official decrees, court outcomes, and sensational news from across the empire. Wealthy citizens had their slaves copy it and share it with friends, creating a viral spread of the day's talking points. This is not a distant cousin to our social media feeds and 24-hour news cycles. It is a direct predecessor. The acta diurna was a one-to-many broadcast from a central authority, designed to shape public opinion and create a shared reality. Today, our feeds are algorithmically curated, pulling from millions of sources instead of one government office. But the human desire is identical: to scroll through a digest of what's happening in our world, to be informed, entertained, and to feel connected to a larger community. The chatter in the forum after the bulletins were posted, the debates and rumors, that was the comment section of its day. The medium has exploded from a whitewashed board to a global, interactive platform, yet the core behavior, the compulsive check for updates, the sharing of news, and the formation of public opinion around published information, is a pattern the Romans would recognize instantly. Even the administrators of these vast networks share a common profile. A Roman provincial governor was far more than a political leader. He was the head administrator of a regional server. He received data packets, tax reports, and census scrolls from local towns. His staff processed and filtered that data, and he compiled essential reports to send upstream to the central server in Rome. He was responsible for local security, maintaining the physical infrastructure of roads and way stations in his province, and ensuring the smooth flow of information. Today, a server administrator for a large company or a data center performs a strikingly similar role. They manage the local network, ensure data flows smoothly to and from the central cloud, maintain security protocols to keep out digital bandits, and troubleshoot problems to prevent system crashes. Both roles are about stewardship of a node within a larger, vital network. The governor's officium, or staff of clerks and scribes, is the ancient equivalent of an IT department, keeping the provincial system online and interoperable with the rest of the empire. This perspective flips the narrative of technological progress on its head. We did not invent the need for a network, we inherited it. The drive to connect, to communicate faster than our bodies can travel, to store knowledge beyond our individual memories, and to administer complex societies. These are not modern desires. They are ancient human imperatives. The Romans, with the tools of their time, built a magnificent solution to these eternal problems. We have simply found new materials, glass, electricity, and code to build a faster, vaster version of the same thing. Our fiber optic cables are their paved roads. Our cloud servers are their archive libraries. Our social media feeds are their posted bulletins. Seeing these parallels does not diminish our achievements, it deepens them. It roots our dizzying digital world in a long human story of connection, reminding us that every time we click send on a message, we are participating in a ritual as old as empire, casting a tiny piece of ourselves onto a great invisible road, hoping it finds its way home. But this powerful analogy also faces thoughtful pushback from historians. It is crucial to acknowledge that the Roman system, for all its sophistication, was built on a foundation of profound inequality. This was not the World Wide Web as we envision it today, open and accessible to billions. The cursus publicus was an exclusive government intranet, a closed network designed by the elite for the elite. Its entire purpose was to serve the state, to consolidate imperial power, manage resources, and control a population, not to empower them. The average Roman citizen, the farmer in Campania or the potter in Hispania, could not send a message on this network. They had no access to its speed or its security. Their world of information was limited to local gossip, town criers, and the slow, expensive services of private tabularii if they could afford them at all. The interactivity we take for granted was completely absent. There was no two-way conversation, no forum for public comment, no ability for a provincial subject to publish a rebuttal to an imperial edict and have it heard across the empire. Information flowed overwhelmingly in one direction, from the center to the periphery, a top-down broadcast of command. Some scholars argue that calling this an internet, even an ancient one, risks glossing over this fundamental power dynamic. It was a tool of control, not liberation. Furthermore, the system's reach, while vast, had hard geographic and social limits. It thinned at the edges of the empire and was virtually non-existent beyond the frontiers. Within the empire, its benefits were not distributed evenly. They flowed to soldiers, officials, and the wealthy merchant class who could piggyback on its infrastructure. For the vast majority, life remained intensely local, their horizons bounded by the distance they could walk in a day and the news that arrived with the seasonal market. Recognizing these limitations does not diminish the Roman achievement. Instead, it grounds it in historical reality. The brilliance of their network is actually heightened when we see it for what it was, a monumental administrative tool that allowed a pre-industrial society to achieve a level of integration that would not be seen again for over 1,000 years. It was a prototype, a proof of concept built with the materials of its age, stone, papyrus, and human muscle. It shows us the skeleton of a connected world, but one that was still waiting for the technology and perhaps the ideology to truly give it a voice. So where does this leave us? Was it an internet or not? The truth lies not in a simple yes or no, but in understanding what an information network truly is at its core. The Romans did not have digital code, silicon chips, or instantaneous global communication. They could not send a cat video from Londinium to Alexandria in a heartbeat. In that strict technological sense, no, they did not have the internet. But if we look beyond the wires to the underlying functions, the parallels become undeniable and profound. What they built was a sophisticated, empire-wide information and logistics network that performed many of the same essential jobs. It achieved rapid long-distance transmission, shrinking weeks of travel into days. It operated on shared, standardized protocols, from Latin law to imperial coinage, that allowed every part of the system to understand the others. It was built on interconnected nodes, from humble way stations to bustling provincial capitals that routed information efficiently. And it managed vast flows of data, from grain harvest figures to military intelligence, with a bureaucratic precision that kept a continent running. In essence, they constructed the ancient world's most advanced wide-area network. It was a physical, analog internet, a monumental system of stone, scroll, and human endurance designed to solve the same eternal problem: how to make a vast, diverse world feel small, manageable, and connected. Their achievement reframes history, showing us that the dream of a networked world is not a modern invention, but a very ancient human ambition, realized with the brilliant tools of its time. The Roman story offers us a mirror not just to the past, but to the fragile foundations of our own connected world. Their greatest lesson is that civilization itself is built on infrastructure, but not just the kind you can see. The physical roads were astonishing, yet they would have been useless without the invisible bureaucracy that gave them purpose. The shared language of Latin, the standardized laws, the meticulously trained couriers, the filing systems in the archives, these were the soft infrastructure, the protocols and the people that made the hard infrastructure of stone come alive. A road is just a path. A road with way stations, milestones, and a rider carrying a sealed pouch from the emperor is a nervous system. This teaches us that true connection requires both layers, the physical pipeline and the human rules that govern what flows through it. We see this today. Our internet relies on undersea cables and data centers, the hard infrastructure, but it also depends on a soft infrastructure of software protocols, domain name systems, and social norms that we often take for granted until they break. The Romans remind us that both layers must be maintained, funded, and protected, or the entire system can unravel. Their experience also forces us to confront timeless challenges that every network, ancient or digital, must face. The first is control. The cursus publicus was a tool of absolute imperial authority, designed to consolidate power, not to distribute it. Our internet was born with a more democratic ideal, yet we now wrestle with similar questions. Who controls the flow of information? Is it governments regulating content, corporations shaping our feeds with algorithms, or a decentralized community of users? The Roman network fragmented when competing powers seized its nodes. We must ask if our digital world, for all its distributed design, is vulnerable to new forms of centralization or balkanization, where information flows only within certain ideological or national silos. The second challenge is access. In Rome, the benefits of the network flowed overwhelmingly to the state and the commercial elite. The common farmer was disconnected from its high-speed channels. Today, we call this the digital divide. Billions remain offline, not due to a lack of technology, but because of cost, geography, or education. A network that excludes large portions of humanity cannot claim to be truly global, just as the Roman system could never claim to serve its entire population. Then there is the ever-present challenge of security and trust. The Romans used wax seals and simple ciphers to protect their data packets from interception and corruption. We use encryption and firewalls, but the core struggle is identical. How do you ensure a message arrives intact and from the person who claims to have sent it? They feared forged seals and bandits on the road. We fear data breaches, deepfakes, and state-sponsored hackers. The arms race between securing information and stealing it is a constant in any information age. Perhaps the most haunting parallel, however, is the challenge of decay. The Roman network did not vanish in a day. It eroded over generations as funding dried up, maintenance was neglected, and physical insecurity made travel perilous. The stations were abandoned one by one, and the lights went out region by region. Our digital infrastructure is also physical. Server farms need power and cooling. Undersea cables can be cut, satellites degrade. More critically, our soft infrastructure, the shared protocols and standards that allow global interoperability, requires constant cooperation and renewal. If political or commercial will fractures, could we see a digital dark age, not from a single catastrophe, but from a slow, relentless neglect? Could parts of our global network gradually become inaccessible, like abandoned Roman roads reclaimed by the forest? This leads to the final, urgent question. Is our network more resilient? We have designed it to be. The Internet's original architecture was meant to survive a nuclear attack, routing around damage automatically. It is decentralized in a way the top-down Roman system never was. Yet, for all its distributed strength, we have built new central points of failure, colossal data hubs, and critical choke points in global supply chains for the chips that power everything. Our dependence on it is also total in a way Rome's never was. If their network slowed, the empire became harder to govern, but life in a village went on. If our digital networks were to significantly fail, our financial systems, food logistics, and energy grids could stagger. The Roman analogy suggests that resilience is not just about robust engineering. It is about social and economic continuity when the high-speed connections go down. They had a local, analog world to fall back on. Do we? The legacy of Rome's ancient internet is not a historical curiosity. It is a cautionary tale and a source of profound insight. It shows that building a connected world is one of humanity's oldest and greatest ambitions. But it also whispers that maintaining that connection, keeping it open, secure, and resilient against the tides of time and conflict, is the endless challenge that every civilization must ultimately face. The story of the Roman information machine is a journey from stone roads to light-speed data. We have traced the path of a sealed dispatch, seeing it move through a network of way stations and couriers, managed by administrators in provincial capitals and secured by wax and cipher, all to sustain an empire of unimaginable scale. The parallels are too striking to ignore: a physical network of roads mirroring our fiber optic cables, the relay of couriers prefiguring our packet switching protocols, and the posted bulletins of the acta diurna foreshadowing our endless news feeds. Yet the distinctions are just as vital. Their system was a closed loop of state power, not an open web of public discourse, and its speed, while revolutionary, was bound by the limits of horse and sail. So, did the Romans have an ancient internet? In the strict technological sense, no. But in the deeper, functional sense, they built something profoundly similar: a wide area network that solved the age-old problems of distance and administration with the brilliant tools of their time. This reveals something fundamental about us: the drive to connect, to speak across mountains, to share knowledge, and to feel part of a world larger than our village is not a modern invention. It is a timeless human urge. The Roman internet was one magnificent stone and papyrus expression of that ancient, enduring dream. What do you think? Does the analogy of an ancient internet hold water for you, or is it stretching the concept too far? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed unraveling this historical mystery with me, please subscribe. There are countless more puzzles from the past waiting to be explored.